Okay, so the next article we're going to get to here is David Brooks. So David Brooks is a neocon. He's a war hawk. He was a big supporter of the George W. Bush policies when he was president, and you know, in every possible scenario, has always pushed for some sort of stupid endless war, and he all of a sudden has realized what a big supporter of Joe Biden he is now. So when you consider the fact that Joe Biden is basically a Republican, he's basically a moderate Republican at this point. That doesn't. It's not too surprising, but it's pretty pathetic to see how far the Democrats have fallen. That they're getting the support of these conservatives when, I mean, so like what I covered on my last show, I covered how the Lincoln Project was one of the founders of the Lincoln Project was caught for trying to get sexual favors from like little boys and stuff. It was a very creepy story. But this Lincoln Project was run by a bunch of Republicans who are grifters, and they're trying to use the Democratic Party as a kind of a springboard into pushing for more so-called moderate policies. So any kind of like the rise of Bernie Sanders and the squad and everything, they don't like that. Even though like I criticize the squad, I criticize Bernie Sanders, I criticize all these like kind of like full aggressives out there that push for so-called, well, claim to push for so-called policies, but pushing for it is not enough. You have to actually fight for it, and a lot of them are not doing that. So I have an issue with that. A lot of leftists that I know have an issue with that, and but these moderate Republicans, they look at somebody like AOC, they look at somebody like the people like the Squad, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, all those figures that I've mentioned before, let alone Bernie Sanders, and they look at, oh my God, these people are going to make the political system further to the left, and that's terrible. We can't have that. We can't have people that are too far to the left, because if it's too far to the left, then we're going to become communists and socialists and this and that. So these neocons, these conservatives, they have to make sure to like swoop in as like the white knights and like save us from the socialist, so-called socialist takeover, when really the things that Bernie Sanders, the things that the Squad and everything are pushing for are just basically, as it said in the last article, no, as much as that article sucked, but as much as just like the last article pointed out, pushing for very social democratic policies, not socialist policies, socially democratic policies. And a lot of those things are things that are being pushed in other countries that are not socialist countries. So it's not like we're not becoming like Cuba, we're not becoming like Venezuela, nothing like that. We're becoming like, or at least wanting to become those people. At least if it was up to those people, Bernie Sanders, AOC types, we would be becoming like Germany, we would be becoming like Scandinavia, we'd be becoming like UK, Canada, whatever stuff, like a mixture of all those different kind of countries. And but no, these conservatives can't have any of that. They hate that. So David Brooks puts out this article here, and so let me read through it a little bit here, and then we'll discuss. So it starts out by saying, so the title of the article is ridiculous title, and even the sub headlines are pretty ridiculous. It says Joe Biden is a transformational president. Really? Wow. Okay. So let's find out maybe if he really, if he has done some really transformational things here. And the subheadline says, "We are seeing a policy realignment without a partisan realignment." Yeah, well, that's definitely for true. That's definitely for sure. So the article starts out by saying, "This has been one of the most quietly consequential weeks in recent American politics. The COVID relief law that was just enacted is one of the most important pieces of legislation of our lifetimes. As Eric Levitz writes in New York Magazine, the poorest fifth of households will see their income rise by 20%. Let's see here. 20%. A family of four with one working and one unemployed parent will receive $12,460 in benefits. Child poverty will be cut in half. They're pushing that again as well, of course. The law stretches far far beyond COVID-19 relief. There's $1 billion for national service programs. Black farmers will receive over $4 billion in what looks like a step toward reparations. I don't know about that, but okay. There's a huge expansion of health insurance subsidies. Yeah, wonderful. More of the health insurance companies getting involved in screwing us over. It says many of these changes, like the child tax credit, may well become permanent. So that's another thing. Another thing that the media and Democrats are pushing as like this wonderful thing is like, oh, child tax credit, child tax credit. It's such a great thing. You have to give Joe Biden so much credit for that. So it says, as Michael Hendricks of the Manhattan Institute notes, America spent $4.8 trillion in today's dollars fighting World War II. Over the past year, America has spent over $5.5 trillion fighting the pandemic. Wow, that's actually much more. That's very significant. It says, in a polarized era, the legislation is widely popular. 3/4 of Americans support the law, including 60% of Republicans, according to Morning Consult survey. The Republican members of Congress voted against it, but the GOP shows no interest in turning this into a great partisan battle. As I began to write this on Thursday morning, the Fox News homepage had only 2 stories on the COVID relief bill and dozens on things like the royal family and cancel culture. Yeah, well, that's not surprising. So I want to just address quickly. I want to address the whole point being made as far as they're saying here. So they're pointing out how in a polarized era, we've been polarized for a long time. So they're acting like as if like we've just now become polarized. No, okay. So, or at least as if we weren't polarized before. But anyway, it says the 3/4 of Americans support the law, including 60% of Republicans. So a large reason for this is, and again, I would say a lot of moderate Republicans. I guess if that's, I don't even know if they know they're moderates or not. But I don't know if they know if they're actually liberals or moderates. I don't know what they are. But anyway, a lot of moderate Republicans did end up voting for Joe Biden, especially a lot of people that are like, white suburban types. A lot of them did end up voting for Biden because they couldn't stand a lot of what Trump was doing when it came to his rhetoric on stop the steal and the whole kind of rigging of the so-called rigging of the election and all this stuff. And they were, I think one state that was very noteworthy was Florida. So when it came to a lot of the older white, I guess, what was it? Probably not maybe Gen X, but also just like the older the boomers and like anything above the boomers and above, pretty much. People like that, a lot of them were voting for Joe Biden because they couldn't stand a lot of the rhetoric that Donald Trump was pushing, and he was coming off as a lunatic, basically. So, and a lot of those people are Republicans. Let's be real. A lot of the people that are older white people, those are Republicans. Older white rich people, those are going to be conservatives. They're going to be Republicans. And they're going to believe in, lower tax cuts. They're going to believe in government, not as much government being involved. But when it comes to something like the presidency, they definitely want stability, and they definitely want somebody that is going to go in there and he's not going to be a bomb thrower, basically. He's going to be somebody that's very like cool mannered, not really, kind of chill, laid back. And let's be real. I mean, obviously Donald Trump is not that. Joe Biden is that compared to Donald Trump, at least. And yeah, so a lot of those, so when 60% of Republicans are supporting Joe Biden, that's not too surprising when you consider how bad Donald Trump was during the latter end of his presidency when it came to all the ridiculous shit he was pushing. But in general, when it comes, so it says 3/4 of Americans support the law. That's also not surprising because, like I said before in the last segment, the Joe Biden is getting a lot of favorable coverage from the media, and he's getting a lot of people kissing his ass and pretending as if, oh, he's so wonderful and he's so progressive and he's so this and that. So obviously, it's not surprising when a bunch of people support something. But let's also be honest. They're also supporting it because they do support getting money in their pocket in the form of stimulus checks and the child tax credit, more unemployment benefits, stuff like that. But you could have easily pushed for $15 minimum wage. You could have pushed for, a monthly UBI. You could have done all that stuff, and it would have had even more support. I guarantee you, it would have definitely been there definitely would have been a hell of a lot more support if you would have pushed for all those extra things that would truly make you look like a FDR style populist, whatever. But obviously, Joe Biden doesn't want to be that, but the media still wants to pretend he is that, so that they basically say okay, well, you don't want to push for any more than that. The policies that Joe Biden has already pushed for is already good enough, and that's what makes him FDR. And if he goes any further, then he's just an all-out socialist, communist, Marxist, whatever. So here it says, so continuing on with the article, it says, somehow low-key Joe Biden gets yawns when he promotes progressive policies that would generate howls if promoted by President Sanders or President Warren. So that's in reference to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, obviously. But that's not even true. Because I don't know about Warren, but I definitely know that Bernie Sanders would push harder than Joe Biden would for when it comes to a $50 minimum wage, let alone a living wage, let alone universal health care, let alone student debt relief, canceling all student debt, all those different things, getting out of wars. Joe Biden is staying in all the wars, and that pisses off a lot of leftists like myself. So, yeah, no, there's like he's pretending as if there's some sort of double standard. That's not true, because compared to Joe Biden, who, like I said, is a moderate Republican, President Bernie Sanders or President Warren would be a lot more further to the left. I mean, even though I think a lot people make a lot more hay out of it than they should, Elizabeth Warren did come up with the idea for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which helped a lot of Americans who were getting screwed over by fraudsters and banks that were ripping them off, and people that were getting scammed by different people that were pretending to be debt collectors and stuff like that. And if you sign up for some sort of credit card protection, that it ends up being some sort of scam, and you end up getting screwed over, and then you get milked of all your money. Basically, you get jacked of all your money. But other than that, I mean, when it comes to economic policy, I think she's honestly very milquetoast, and I think Bernie is further to the left than she is. But other than the kind of advocacy for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is something that President Obama put into place, and then Trump pretty much got rid of it, or at least cut it down to the bare minimum. But I'm not sure what Joe Biden is going to do regarding the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but hopefully he puts that into place again as it was under Obama. But compared to Joe Biden, obviously Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are going to be further to the left and are going to be much more progressive and lefty, because Joe Biden is so far to the right. And he's basically a conservative Democrat, and he has been for his entire career, and he knows that too. He knows that, but he obviously isn't going to go out there and admit it. Although it is funny, because when Barack Obama was president, he actually talked about how, a lot of my policies are very similar to what they were under Ronald Reagan. Or we're going to be getting to Ronald Reagan here in a moment, as you can see in this piece. But yeah, Barack Obama was portraying his policies as a lot of people that supported Ronald Reagan would support my policies because they're just like his. Okay, that's not something to brag about. That's not a good thing, but obviously Obama wanted to do everything to appeal to, people on the other side of the aisle, even though they would, spit in his eye and, flip him off every time anyway. So I never understood why he tried to do that. So David Brooks continues on here. It says, this moment is like 1981, the dawn of the Reagan Revolution, except in reverse. It's not just that government is heading in a new direction, it's that the whole paradigm of the role of government in American life is shifting. Biden is not causing these tectonic plates to shift, but he is riding them. Reagan was the right response to the stagflation of the 1970s. But Bidenism is a sensible response to a very different set of economic problems. Let one set of the statistics stand in for hundreds. According to a term of researchers led by Raj Shetty, in 1970, 90% of 30-year-olds were making more than their parents had at that age. By 2010, only 50% were. There was a premise, though. There was a premise through American history that if you worked hard, you would earn economic security. That's not as true for millennials and Gen Z or many other people across America. These realities have created a different emotional climate that the pandemic has magnified, a climate of insecurity and precarity. These realities have also produced an intellectual revolution. So, yeah, so I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, it's weird how David Brooks is pushing this idea that like Reaganism was like this wonderful thing, but when you really think about it, the policies of Reaganomics and Ronald Reagan, it was all centered around the idea of trickle down economics, deregulation of Wall Street, and tax cuts for the rich. That's all it is. And obviously, anybody that's been following politics for even 1 year, even if you just got into politics, you would know that the main policies that all Republicans push for are those three things. They always push for trickle down economics, which includes deregulation of Wall Street and tax cuts for the rich. When it comes to economic policies, that's all they like, and that's all they want. And they think like that's gonna lead, it's gonna lead us to the fucking promised land. They think like that's gonna fix all of our problems, and we're gonna be good as gold as long as we do everything that Ronald Reagan did. And ironically, this is something. So the policies that Reagan was pushing, Reaganism was, this is something that even George H.W. Bush, who was Ronald Reagan's VP. Ronald Reagan was president for 8 years. George H.W. Bush, the father of George W. Bush, was the VP of Ronald Reagan from 1980 to 1988 when Reagan was president. And even when George H.W. Bush ran for president after Ronald Reagan left office, he even criticized Reagan's policies, which, if you think about it, is mind-blowing. That kind of stuff does not happen. No VP, let alone anybody in the same party, ever criticizes directly the president's. I mean, unless you want to count Bernie Sanders, obviously, but very rarely does any candidate from the same party criticize the policies of that last president. And this is something that George H.W. Bush did. And he referred to it as voodoo economics. And he knew that system of so-called, like, oh, well, if we do tax cuts, it's all going to trickle down to the regular people. No, that's bullshit. That has been debunked one time, more than a million times over, and obviously conservatives are not going to concede the point on that, but it's true that, you can't really honestly expect Republicans and conservatives to concede the point there, but that's the reality though. So I mean, it's obvious that like anything that Reagan did, honestly, it was a failure. If you want to be, at least when it comes to economic policy, to be fair, he was actually pretty decent when it came to like gun control and stuff like that. He handled the AIDS crisis, the AIDS epidemic. There was an AIDS epidemic that he handled terribly. So that was another thing he fucked up on. But like gun control, he was very good on and stuff. So that's kind of a rare situation where a Republican was actually very liberal on guns, which, or at least to the left or progressive, whatever, on guns. So that was pretty interesting. But it's weird that like, while Brooks admits that the role of government being larger is, to help is necessary right now. So, I mean, he basically makes that point here, I think. It says, so let's go on here. It says, it was assumed even only a decade ago that the Fed could not just print money with abandon. It was assumed that the government would not rack up huge debt without spraying inflation and crippling debt payment costs. Both of these concerns have been thrown out the window by large numbers of thinkers. We've seen years of high debt and loose monetary policy, but inflation has not come. So the restraints have been cast aside. We are now experiencing monetary and fiscal policies that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. This is like the moment when the GOP abandoned fiscal conservatism for the go-go excitement of supply-side economics, which eventually devolved into mindless tax cuts for the rich. The role of government is being redefined. There is now assumption that government should step in to reduce economic insecurity and inequality. Even Republicans like Tom Cotton and Mitt Romney, for example, are cooking up a plan to actively boost wages for American workers. To be accurate here, I don't know about Tom Cotton. I didn't know Tom Cotton was pushing for anything like that. But Mitt Romney apparently, and I think this was also something that Joe Manchin, conservative Democrat Joe Manchin from West Virginia, was pushing for, was I believe an $11 or $12 minimum wage, which is extremely meager. I mean, that's not even close to what we need. And I mean, it's we need at least, like I said, we need at least a $15 minimum wage. 11, 12. I think another person was even saying 10, which is, oh my god, that's so ridiculous. We're at 7.25 now. Why the hell would we want to just go up to a couple of dollars? That makes no sense. So while Brooks admits that the role of government being larger to help is necessary right now, and is something even establishment Republicans would seem to be getting on board with, in reality, it's President Biden that is taking the most bare minimum of approaches, and you can see that in all you can see that in the legislation that he's pushing for when it comes to the when it comes to the stimulus bill. Even though it's like, oh my God, it's such a big bill, $1.9 trillion, almost $2 trillion. Like the Democrats pretend as if because it's such a big amount of money, they pretend as if, oh well, that means because it's $1.9 trillion, that means it must be really like extensive and it must be helping out a lot of people. But it's bullshit, because a lot of it is half measures and not even going close to as far. Like we said before, again, no $50 minimum wage, no living wage, no student debt cancellation relief, whatever. No, universal health care, Medicare for all in the middle of a fucking pandemic. I mean, talk about not being able to read the room. Joe Biden does not know how to do that at all, or he just doesn't care. So yeah, I mean, he won't even make the stimulus checks reoccurring. He won't raise the minimum wage for the first time, like we said before, for the first time since 2009. He won't do a rent freeze, which would be really helpful. I think they're doing currently a temporary rent freeze until I think it was Biden himself that said it. We're doing a temporary rent freeze until the pandemic is over. But what does that mean? When is the pandemic going to be over? The pandemic isn't even close to being over. Just because less people are dying than they were like a few months ago, that doesn't mean the pandemic is anywhere close to being over. Yeah, it's getting a little bit better, but who knows with schools reopening again, and then different states opening 100%. One of them being Texas. Yeah, who knows if any of that stuff is if we're truly going to be able to get back to normal when it comes to this terrible pandemic, this deadly pandemic. But yeah, he doesn't want to push for an actual rent freeze. He's only doing it like partially. Won't push for universal health care, like I said, during a pandemic, which has killed more than 500,000 people. I mean, imagine that. That's crazy. I honestly thought when it came to the pandemic, when the pandemic got really bad under Trump, I thought that Joe Biden wouldn't be able to continue doing as well as he did during the primary, especially against Bernie Sanders, who's pushing for, Medicare for all, single payer, whatever, universal health care. When this whole thing happened, I was like, there's no way people are gonna want Joe Biden to be the guy that's gonna represent the Democratic Party in the middle of a deadly pandemic where people just continued to die and die. I don't know what the numbers were back then, but it was going up. It was high. It was going up on a monthly, weekly, daily basis. It was going up and up and up, and only getting worse. And obviously, like I said, now we're at 500,000 deaths. More than that, plus over 500,000 deaths. We're probably reaching 600 soon. But yeah, so it's just wild to me how anybody thought that Joe Biden was going to truly be the savior when it came to defeating Donald Trump. Honestly, the only reason that Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden was because of the pandemic. If the pandemic wouldn't have happened, I think Donald Trump would have cruised to victory. And then what would have happened? The Democrats would have blamed Russia. They would have blamed the third-party voters and this whatever, and Bernie Sanders and the lefties and stuff, because they did the same. They did that in 2016. They were going to do the same thing this time around too, for sure. So that wouldn't have been a surprise at all. But so like this establishment narrative to portray Joe Biden as a progressive FDR type is their attempt to it's their attempt to draw the line and tell people that. I mentioned it before. It's their attempt to tell people that Joe Biden shouldn't go any further to the left when it comes to especially when it comes to economic policy. They don't want him to go any further to the left because they think that if he goes further to the left, he's going to be too far left and he's going to be too radical and he's going to be too extreme and he's all that stuff. All that kind of bullshit that you that you hear, because whenever you listen to the media, they did this to Bernie Sanders ad nauseum, and ad infinitum, and they're going to pretend as if Joe Biden is some kind of crazy radical, and that's clearly not true. Anybody with a brain can see that Joe Biden is not anywhere close to being a radical, anywhere close to being, any kind of progressive or anything like that. And, this was the case under Barack Obama. I don't know if it's quite the case under Biden, but Barack Obama and his people, his administration, which included Joe Biden, they were very, very scared of what Fox News thought, what Fox News was saying, what Fox News was, how they were portraying Barack Obama's policies, saying he's a socialist, saying he's a communist, saying he's too far left. Now it's like, honestly, that responsibility has been brought on to the entire media, and the reason is because of Bernie Sanders, because the entire media, the corporate media, is scared of this country becoming anything like any other developed country and having truly good leftist policies, that they're going to try and shame you from getting from being anywhere close to a lefty, even if it's even a little bit. Anything that's to the left of like Ronald Reagan, pretty much, is they're going to try and avoid it. So that's how crazy it is. And I don't know. I don't know why they think that's a good. Obviously I know why, because they're all corporatists and they're all pushing for the system to remain the way it is. But at the end of the day, this is going to just lead to another Donald Trump. Donald Trump might be running in 2024 because he didn't end up getting impeached from the House and the Senate. And now when it comes to being charged with different crimes, when it comes to corruption, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. He did get impeached, but he didn't get impeached from the Senate. You have to get impeached from the House and the Senate for the impeachment to truly be count for what it is. And they didn't do that. And that was one of their ways to, instead of actually fighting him on his shitty policies, they were like, oh no, let's try and impeach him so he doesn't run again for president. That's your fucking motivation? You can't even just beat him. You can't even beat this fucking buffoon clown on his shitty, terrible policies, that you got to go out there and pretend as if, oh no, if we beat him on his, trying to impeach him and trying to get rid of him in that way, that's going to work really, really well. This is how freaking clueless these people are, bro. This is the type of people we're dealing with, and it's unbelievable. So, so hopefully we'll see what happens when the further the Biden administration goes along, and the further I don't know what's going to happen to the House. I don't know what's going to happen with Congress. I don't know what's going to happen with the squad. I don't know if I don't know if Nina Turner, who's running in the state of Ohio, she's running for the congressional seat that was left open by, what was her name, Marcia Fudge, I believe. She ended up joining the Biden administration under, I think it was HUD, the Housing of Urban Development. I think Marcia Fudge joined that part of the administration. So she's there now. So Nina Turner is one of the, I'm sure, many Democrats that's running. There's going to be Republicans on the other side running as well. But they're gonna, we're gonna see. We're gonna see what happens. But I don't have a lot of confidence in. I don't have a lot of confidence in Democrats of any sort right now saving us and, helping us truly move on from the corporatist, takeover, not even takeover, but the corporatist ruling of the Democratic Party that, continues to only get worse and worse. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, it's going to be a long road, and 2024 doesn't look good for progressives when it comes to having a good candidate that's a truly good candidate that's going to lead us into the future, and that really worries me. So we'll see what happens, but the future looks pretty bleak.